Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we turn our attention to the flickering gas lamps and grimy cobblestones of Victorian London, a city both grand and squalid. We're stepping into a world that exists in the shadows of polite society, a place of gilded cages and unspoken rules. You're about to see a reality far removed from the romanticised image of lace and finery. You probably won't survive this with your innocence intact, much less your health. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, feel free to post your location and the local time in the comments. It's always a trip to see where everyone is listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The iron gate groans open, the sound a low complaint in the damp London air, and you step across the threshold, leaving the frantic, foggy chaos of the street behind you. A moment ago you were just another face in the endless river of humanity, bundled against the cold, your meagre possessions clutched in a worn valise. Now you are a commodity, a potential, and the air inside is thick with the scent of cheap perfume, stale pipe smoke, and the lingering, soapy odour of carbolic acid. The door closes with a definitive thud, a period at the end of a sentence you never wanted to write. You've arrived at your new home, a place of forced gentility and carefully curated desperation, tucked away on a respectable-looking street, its secrets hidden behind lace curtains and a veneer of respectability. This isn't the kind of place you see in a penny dreadful, all lurid sensationalism and sinister villains. This is a business, and you're its newest asset. A formidable woman emerges from the shadows, her ample frame draped in a dark silk dress that rustles like dry leaves. She is the Madam, and her name, you'll soon learn, is a whispered word of both reverence and fear. Her eyes, sharp as a tax collector's, scan you from head to toe, an inventory of your physical merits and flaws. A thin, approving smile touches her lips, and you know you've passed the initial inspection. "Come in, my dear," she says, her voice a low purr. "There's much to learn." You're ushered into a front parlour that attempts to mimic a drawing room of a slightly less affluent household. The furniture is heavy and dark, upholstered in velvet that has seen better days. A piano stands in one corner, its keys yellowed with age, and a fire crackles in a grate, casting dancing shadows on the walls. This is the stage upon which you will perform your nightly role. But first, you must understand the surprisingly rigid social hierarchy that governs this gilded cage. At the top, of course, is the Madam, the unseen architect of your world, the one who holds all the keys, both literally and figuratively. Below her, a hierarchy of your peers exists, an unspoken pecking order based on seniority, beauty, and the ability to attract high-paying clients. The most senior girls, the prima donnas, occupy the best rooms and get first pick of the most desirable clients. They are often older, more cunning, and have a cynical wisdom that seems as heavy as a lead apron. They might offer you a wry smile or a condescending nod, but their kindness is a rare commodity. Beneath them are the girls like you, new, fresh-faced, and still clinging to a last desperate shred of hope. And at the bottom, the most tragic figures, are the has-beens, those whose youth has faded and whose bodies are scarred by the life they've led. They are relegated to the least desirable tasks, their value diminished to a few coins a night. This stratification is a microcosm of the larger society you've just left. It's a ruthless meritocracy based on youth and physical appeal, a bitter joke in a world obsessed with appearances. One mainstream historical fact about Victorian brothels is that they were often segregated by class, with different establishments catering to different clientele, from the high-end, discreet maisons de joie to the squalid, dangerous kip houses of the East End. This place, you quickly realise, is a maison, a cut above the rest, and for a fleeting moment you feel a faint, perverse sense of relief. You've landed in the upper echelons of a very grim profession. The Madame introduces you to a few of the other girls with a flourish, as if presenting a new showpiece. A young woman named Eliza, with eyes that seem to hold an ancient weariness, gives you a curt nod. She's one of the prima donnas, a top earner with a reputation for being cold and detached. Historians still argue whether the apparent detachment of some of these women was a coping mechanism or a genuine lack of empathy, a defence mechanism born of necessity. You get the distinct feeling it's the former. She probably doesn't even remember the person she was before this life. Then there's Sally, a younger girl, still full of a nervous energy that hasn't been completely extinguished. She offers a genuine, albeit fleeting, smile. You also meet the housemaid, a stern-faced woman who seems to disapprove of your very existence, and a scullery boy who scurries by with a bucket of coals, barely making eye contact. Everyone here, you see, has a part to play, a role in a silent, well-rehearsed production. It's a peculiar kind of community, isn't it? A family of sorts bound together by mutual exploitation and a shared, unspoken understanding of their circumstances. The rules are unwritten, but absolute. You must be punctual, you must never contradict the madam, and you must never, ever, let your true emotions show to a client. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams, particularly in the more respectable establishments, would enforce a strict code of behaviour that prohibited vulgar language and crude jokes among the girls, believing that a veneer of refinement attracted a better class of client. It's the kind of subtle hypocrisy that's so very Victorian, isn't it? As if using the word parlour instead of front room somehow changed the nature of the business being conducted. The madam's voice snaps you out of your reverie. Your room is upstairs. You'll be sharing with Sally. Now, we have a dressmaker coming tomorrow to measure you, so you will need to get a good night's rest. You'll be ready for your first introduction on Saturday. She says, introduction, as if you're about to be presented at court, not to be sold to the highest bidder. You nod, mute, and follow Sally up the creaking staircase. Every step feels like a nail in the coffin of your old life. The air grows colder as you ascend, and a faint smell of mildew hangs in the air. The stairs creak in a rhythm that seems to mock your silent ascent. A silent countdown to a life you never imagined. You've passed the point of no return. You're a Victorian brothel worker, and the journey has only just begun. The door to your new room creaks open, revealing a space no larger than a good-sized closet. It's not so much a bedroom as it is a storage container for a human being. The air inside is cold and smells of dust and old linen. A single narrow bed with a lumpy mattress and a threadbare wool blanket is pushed against one wall. Beside it, a small washstand with a chipped basin and pitcher stands sentinel. A tiny barred window high up on the opposite wall lets in a sliver of weak, grey light, a constant reminder of the world you can no longer freely access. This, you're told, is your sanctuary. This is where you will rest your head and, more importantly, where you will conduct a significant portion of your business. It's a room with a view of nothing, a stage for a single, repetitive act. Sally, your new roommate, flops down on the bed with a sigh that seems to carry the weight of 1,000 days. She motions to the other, identical bed on the opposite wall. "Don't mind the mattress," she says, her voice flat. "You get used to the lumps eventually, or you get so tired you don't even notice them." She's a bit older than you, maybe 17 or 18, with eyes that have seen too much but a face that hasn't quite lost its softness. She's your guide, your reluctant mentor, and the only person in this house who isn't paid to pretend to like you. The first thing you learn is the secret language of the house, a web of coded signals and slang that exists to protect the business and its inhabitants from the prying eyes and ears of the outside world. It's a language born of necessity, of survival, and it's as important as breathing here. For example, a bird isn't a feathered creature, but a client. A gilded bird is a wealthy one, a scruffy bird is a poor one, and a caged bird is one who's already taken, but still looking for some extracurricular activity. When a girl says she's going to go up the stairs for a cup of tea, it means she's taking a client to her room. If she says the kettle's not working, it's a warning that the client is dangerous or unruly. This clandestine lexicon is a fascinating quirk of the profession, a hidden culture existing within the rigid public-facing society of the Victorians. One mainstream historical fact about these coded languages is that they weren't unique to brothels. Many marginalised groups and subcultures in Victorian London, from beggars to thieves, developed their own argot, or cant, to communicate and to maintain a sense of solidarity and safety. The brothel slang is just another example of this phenomenon, a way to create a private world within a public one. It's a testament to the human need for community and connection, even in the most isolating of circumstances. Sally, as she's peeling off her day dress and wincing at a bruise on her arm, teaches you a few of the basics. If the madam gives you a look, she says, and touches the locket on her necklace, it means there's a constable on the street. You have to be quiet as a mouse and don't look out the window. A quirky or fringe tidbit of information is that some brothels had elaborate bell systems or even small hidden levers that could be pulled to signal a police raid or an unwanted visitor. Historians still argue whether these systems were primarily for the girl's safety or to protect the establishment's reputation and avoid fines. You get the distinct impression it was the latter. Sally also explains the social currency of the house. Favours are the real money here. If a girl lends you a ribbon or a spare corset string, you owe her. If she covers for you when you're sick, you owe her. This isn't a place for casual generosity. Everything has a price. The solidarity you share with the other women is a fragile thing, constantly tested by rivalry and the inherent loneliness of the profession. As you unpack your few belongings, you realise how little you have. A few spare clothes, a small comb, a cheap locket with a faded picture of your mother inside. It's all a poignant reminder of the person you used to be, the life you've left behind. You hide the locket under your pillow, a small rebellion against your new reality. You can't let anyone see it. It's a sign of a past, a vulnerability that is a liability in this place. The air is getting colder and you shiver. The window, high and small, is the only source of fresh air, and it's sealed shut. It's a symbolic detail, isn't it? Trapped in a room, with no escape, even from the stagnant air. You can't help but laugh a little to yourself. It's a bit on the nose, a bit too much like a cheap melodrama. But then, isn't your life a bit of a cheap melodrama right now? Sally notices your shiver and points to the fireplace. "Don't bother with the fire," she says. "The madam only lets us have a few coals a day and it's not worth it. Best to just put on another layer." She's already pulling on a thick nightdress, the kind of shapeless garment that erases all traces of a woman's body. It's a strange sight after a day of being measured and scrutinised for every inch of your anatomy. It's as if the house allows you to reclaim your body only in the privacy of this small, cold room. The night falls, and the sounds of the city outside begin to fade, replaced by the internal rhythms of the house. The low rumble of a conversation downstairs, the faint sound of a piano, a sudden, sharp laugh. It all drifts up the staircase, a constant low-level hum of activity. You lie awake for a long time, the lumpy mattress digging into your back, the cold seeping into your bones. The silence between you and Sally is heavy, filled with all the things you don't dare to say. The unspoken horrors, the unfulfilled hopes, the crushing weight of your new existence. You think about the world you've left behind, the endless days of drudgery and the constant gnawing hunger. You think about how you swore you'd never end up here, how you'd fight for a better life. But then, the hunger got worse, and the streets got colder, and the choices got smaller until there was only one path left. You came here not out of a moral failing, but out of a simple biological need to survive. Sally's asleep now, her breathing a soft rhythmic sound in the darkness. You look at her profile, a peaceful mask in the faint moonlight. You wonder what she dreams about. Does she dream of a better life, of escaping? Or does she simply dream of a warm bed and a full stomach? You close your eyes and try to find a similar peace, but all you can see is the madam's calculating eyes and the lumpy mattress beneath you. The gilded cage has a tiny, uncomfortable bed, and you are its newest inhabitant. The morning light, when it finally arrives, is a pathetic wash of grey filtering through the high window. The cold from the previous night seems to have seeped into the walls themselves, and you pull the thin blanket up to your chin, trying to recapture a sliver of warmth. Sally's already up, silently splashing water from the chipped basin onto her face. The ritual is a grim, perfunctory affair. The water is frigid, and there's no luxury here. No scented soaps or soft towels. This is not about pampering. It's about cleanliness for the sake of presentation. You are a product, after all, and even a product must be wiped down before it's put on display. The most important figure in your new world, the one whose presence is felt even when she is not there, is the madam. Her name, Mrs. Vance, is spoken with a mix of respect, fear, and a resigned acceptance that she is the undisputed master of your fate. She is the unseen architect of your life here. She owns the building, the clothes you will wear, the furniture you sit on, and the very bed you sleep in. You, in a sense, are just another one of her possessions, albeit a very profitable one. Her role is complex, a paradox of protection and exploitation. She is your protector from the dangers of the street, the violent men, and the ever-present threat of the law. A mainstream historical fact is that madams often had to maintain a delicate balance with local police, sometimes paying bribes to avoid raids, or quietly turning in girls who were no longer profitable or were causing trouble. They were the intermediaries between the underworld and the world of law and order, walking a tightrope of corruption and control. This relationship was a shield for the girls under her care, but it was a shield she wielded for her own benefit, not out of any genuine concern for your well-being. Mrs. Vance's power is absolute. Her word is law. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams were known to have their own private systems of punishment, from docking pay for minor infractions to something as arbitrary as a deportation to a less reputable establishment. It was a constant reminder that your place in her good graces was conditional and fleeting. You're a cog in her well-oiled machine, and if you seize up, she will simply replace you. Historians still argue whether this power structure, with the madam as a central controlling figure, fostered a sense of community among the women or simply intensified their isolation. You get the distinct feeling it's the latter. There's a quiet rivalry here that seems to prevent any real bond from forming. Later that morning you're summoned to her office, a room that feels both opulent and intimidating. Dark wood, heavy curtains, and a large mahogany desk where she sits, writing in a ledger, her spectacles perched on her nose. She gestures for you to sit, and the chair is so plush it feels like it's trying to swallow you whole. She speaks in a low, even tone, laying out the rules. This is a business, my dear, and you are here to be an investment. I have paid for your new wardrobe, for your food, and for this roof over your head. Everything you earn will first go to paying off your debt to me. The word debt hangs in the air, a phantom weight on your shoulders. You'll find, as the days and weeks pass, that this debt is a moving target, an impossible sum that seems to grow no matter how many clients you entertain. It's her way of ensuring you can never truly leave. She then instructs you on the importance of discretion. The gentlemen who come here are respectable men, or at least they pretend to be. They come for a fantasy, and you are part of that fantasy. You will not ask their names. You will not ask about their wives or their families. You will not speak of the business outside these walls. It's a strange kind of secrecy, isn't it? The secret is not that this place exists, for everyone in London knows it, but rather that the respectable men of London frequent it. The secret is the shared lie that keeps the whole system running. You're also told about the dressmaker who will be coming later. Mrs. Vance says that your new clothes must be beautiful, but not too beautiful. They must be alluring, but not overtly suggestive. They must be a subtle invitation, she says, a concept you find utterly ridiculous. It's as if they're trying to hide what's happening in plain sight. It's like putting a frilly bow on a rusty iron trap. You want to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all, but you just nod, your face a blank canvas of compliance. As the day wears on, you get a glimpse of the madam's influence beyond the confines of her office. She manages the flow of food and supplies, haggles with tradesmen, and even settles minor disputes between the girls with a sharp word and a look that could curdle milk. She's a woman who has clawed her way to the top of her own personal food chain, and she has no intention of being knocked off her perch. You realise that she is not your enemy, at least not in the traditional sense. She is simply the embodiment of the system that has consumed you. You are both victims of a kind, a chilling thought. She is a victim of a society that gave her so few options, forcing her to create her own kingdom in the shadows, and you are a victim of a system that sees you as a disposable resource. The bell rings, and the scullery boy rushes past you to answer it. A man, impeccably dressed, is shown into the parlour by the housemaid. He and the madam exchange a few quiet words, and then he is shown upstairs. It's your first time seeing a client in person, and you feel a sickening lurch in your stomach. He looks so ordinary, so unremarkable. He could be anyone, a banker, a shopkeeper, a respectable father of 3. The ease with which he enters this world and sheds his public persona is shocking. This is a place for him to be someone else, but for you it is simply your life, every single day. You remember something Sally said to you last night. She's not a monster. She's just a woman who learned how to survive in a world that wasn't built for us. You find yourself wondering if you will ever become like Mrs. Vance, cold, calculating, and ultimately alone. The thought is more terrifying than any other you've had since you arrived. You would rather be on the street, freezing and hungry, than become a woman who profits from the misery of others. But as you watch the madam, you see a glint of steel in her eyes, a hardness that must have been forged in a fire you can't even imagine. And you know, deep down, that she is simply doing what she has to do. She's not a hero or a villain, she's just a survivor, and she expects you to be one too. The next morning, the ritual begins anew. The clatter of buckets and the hushed voices of the maids echo up the stairwell, signalling the start of another day. But today is different. Today is about your transformation. You're no longer just a person. You're a canvas to be painted, a sculpture to be reshaped. Your body is now a tool, and you must learn to maintain it with a rigour that would exhaust a professional athlete. This is the rigorous regimen of the body, a silent and unending battle against the forces of decay, dirt, and disease. First, there's the bath. Not a luxurious soak, but a scrub. You're led to a small, cold room with a large galvanised metal tub. A maid, a severe-looking woman with a face like a clenched fist, pours buckets of cold water into it. The water is only warmed slightly with a kettle, and you're expected to strip and wash yourself with harsh, brown soap that smells of lye. This is not about feeling good, it's about being clean. Your skin is scrubbed raw, your hair washed with the same coarse soap, and you're expected to emerge from the bath looking pristine and smelling faintly of carbolic acid. One mainstream historical fact is that personal hygiene was a constant battle in Victorian London, with indoor plumbing and hot water being a rarity even in many middle-class homes. For women in your profession, cleanliness wasn't a matter of personal preference but a crucial part of the business, a way to prevent the spread of ailments and to maintain a respectable appearance for clients. After the bath, you're given a set of basic toiletries, a small pot of cold cream, a comb with missing teeth, and a harsh, bristled brush. You learn to make the most of what little you have. You must moisturise your hands and face, comb out every tangle from your hair, and ensure there are no smudges of dirt under your nails. It's an endless Sisyphean task. You've heard whispered stories about other girls who try to cheat the system, who don't bother to wash thoroughly, and you've seen the madam's withering stare and the subsequent punishments. In this world, a single unkempt nail can be a sign of rebellion, a failure to perform your role. The next step is the corset. Ah, the corset. You probably thought they were just for the ladies of high society, didn't you? A quirky or fringe tidbit is that for many women in your line of work, the corset was a tool of the trade, not a fashion statement. It was used to create the desired silhouette, a tiny waist and a full bosom, but it was also a way to maintain posture and to give the impression of a delicate, fragile femininity. You're laced into a rigid, bone-crushing garment, and the maid pulls the strings so tight you can barely breathe. Your ribs protest, and a dizzying wave of nausea washes over you. You're a human hourglass, your body constricted and reshaped to fit the aesthetic demands of the era. You're not allowed to complain. Then comes the makeup. This isn't the subtle application of rouge and powder you might see on a society lady. This is a theatrical mask. You're given a small tin of white lead-based powder, a pot of red dye for your lips and cheeks, and a piece of charcoal to darken your eyebrows. The lead powder, you've heard, is highly toxic and can cause a host of medical problems, but you are expected to use it daily to achieve the fashionable pale complexion. Historians still argue whether the use of such dangerous cosmetics was a conscious choice by the women, a desperate attempt to conform to beauty standards, or a simple lack of knowledge about their harmful effects. You get the distinct feeling it was a mix of both. You knew it was bad for you, but what choice did you have? Your face, your most valuable asset, had to be a perfect, unblemished mask. Your hair must also be a source of constant attention. You are given strict instructions on how to style it, whether in a simple chignon or an elaborate cascade of curls, depending on your assigned role for the night. You spend hours in front of a small cracked mirror, brushing and styling your hair until your arms ache. This is a task that's supposed to be relaxing, an act of self-care. But here, it feels like an interrogation. You're searching for any flaw, any imperfection that might be found by the madam, or, worse, by a client. Every inch of you is scrutinised and perfected. There's a constant pressure to be flawless, to be a living doll. The irony is not lost on you. You're selling a fantasy of perfect, unblemished beauty. But beneath the layers of powder and rouge, your body is a battleground of aches, bruises, and the slow, insidious march of fatigue. Your feet are constantly sore from standing for hours in tight, uncomfortable shoes. Your back aches from the corset. Your lungs ache from the lack of air. You're a masterpiece of deception, a beautiful lie. Sally, your roommate, tells you a story as you're brushing your hair one night. She says she once saw a new girl who refused to wear the lead powder. She had a healthy, rosy complexion, and she didn't see the point. The madam, Mrs. Vance, simply took a brush and applied the powder herself, a forceful, cold act that left no room for discussion. The girl looked in the mirror and cried. Sally says that after that she never saw the girl protest again. It was a silent lesson, a grim warning about the consequences of non-compliance. Your body is no longer your own, it belongs to the house. The routine is a numbing, repetitive cycle. Cleanse, constrict, and colour. Every morning you rise and prepare for the nightly performance. You're an actress in a play with a single scene, a single line of dialogue, and an endless run. There's no intermission, no curtain call. The audience simply changes, but the performance is always the same, and the stage is your body. You think about the freedom of the street, the cold air on your face, the ability to walk wherever you wanted without a second thought. Here, every movement, every expression is a calculated part of the performance. You're not a human being with thoughts and feelings. You're a beautiful, silent object, a repository for a man's desires. The regimen is designed to strip away your individuality, to make you into a generic, desirable type. And as you put on the first layer of white powder, you feel a little more of yourself fade away. You are no longer just you. You're the product. You're the fantasy. You're the perfect Victorian beauty. A lie in a cage. With your body meticulously scrubbed, oiled and constricted, the next step is the construction of your public identity. This is the moment when you become someone else entirely. The door to a large wardrobe room is opened, and you are ushered into a world of rustling silks, starched cottons and the faint sweet smell of lavender. This is the arsenal of deception, the collection of elaborate clothing and makeup that will transform you from a girl of the streets into a desirable, respectable-looking woman. This is fashioning a deceptive identity, a theatrical process where every button, every ribbon and every touch of rouge is a calculated lie. First, you are fitted for your gowns. The dressmaker, a stern-faced woman with a pincushion on her wrist and a measuring tape draped around her neck, takes your measurements with an unsettling precision. The gowns she presents you are not the overtly scandalous garments you might expect. Instead, they are high-collared, long-sleeved dresses made of expensive fabrics, satin, velvet, and taffeta. The colours are muted, and the patterns are small and discreet. This is not about selling nudity. It's about selling an illusion. The gowns are designed to hint at a respectable background, a life of leisure and propriety. They are a crucial part of the fantasy that a man is not visiting a common brothel, but is instead being entertained by a woman of some standing who has perhaps fallen on hard times. One mainstream historical fact is that many high-end brothels went to great lengths to cultivate an air of respectability, often mimicking the decor and customs of the upper classes to attract a more affluent clientele. Your new clothing is a uniform, a costume for your nightly performance. You're not allowed to choose what you wear. The madam selects your gowns each evening based on the kind of clients she expects. You learn to put on the multiple layers of a Victorian woman's dress, the chemise, the drawers, the corset, the petticoats, the bustle, and finally, the gown itself. Each layer is a barrier, both physical and metaphorical, between the truth of who you are and the fantasy you are presenting. You're not a woman in this clothing. You're an elaborate doll, a living mannequin draped in a lie. The makeup, which you already learned about, is applied with a heavy hand. The white lead powder erases any sign of sun-weathered skin, a telltale sign of a life of hard labour. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams would also insist on their girls using belladonna, or deadly nightshade, in their eyes. A single drop would dilate the pupils, giving the wearer a wide-eyed, innocent and alluring look. Of course, it also caused temporary blindness and was highly poisonous, but such was the cost of a desirable appearance. You don't know for sure if the madam here uses such methods, but the rumour is enough to make you wince when you see a fellow girl with unnaturally wide eyes. Then there's the hair. Your hair must be elaborately styled each night. A coiffure that would take a society lady hours to achieve with the help of her maid. You learn to pin and curl your own hair, using heated tongs that sizzle and burn when they touch your skin. You learn to make it look effortless, as if you've simply just woken up this beautiful. A hairpiece might be added for extra volume, or a ribbon or a small artificial flower might be pinned into the elaborate arrangement. It's all part of the mask. You watch as the other girls go through the same transformation. Sally, the quiet one, becomes a radiant, bubbly creature with a flirtatious smile. Eliza, the cynical one, becomes a cool, detached beauty with a haughty expression. Each girl has her own character, her own persona to slip into. You realise that your identity isn't just about how you look, but how you act. You must adopt a new personality each night, a new history. You are no longer yourself. You are the character you have been assigned. This process is both dehumanising and, in a strange way, a kind of protection. By putting on this mask, you don't have to be yourself. You can hide behind a constructed identity, a character you play for a few hours. The things a client might say to you, the things he might do, are not happening to you, but to the character you have created. It's a survival mechanism, a way to separate your mind from your body, to distance yourself from the degrading reality of your life. Historians still argue whether this theatricality was a deliberate strategy by the women to maintain their sanity, or a tool used by the madams to make them more pliable and less resistant to their work. It's probably a bit of both, isn't it? The mask is a cage and a shield at the same time. You're a bit clumsy with the corset strings at first, your fingers fumbling as you try to tie the back. Sally, already dressed in a deep red gown that makes her skin glow, comes over to help. She pulls the laces tight with a practiced hand, and you wince as your ribs are compressed. "You'll get used to it," she says, her voice as flat as her expression. "It's like a second skin." She then helps you with a small beaded purse that hangs from your wrist, a final accessory that contains nothing but a small coin purse and a handkerchief. It's another prop in the grand theatrical performance. Looking at your reflection in the mirror, you don't recognise yourself. The girl with the timid eyes and the worried expression is gone, replaced by a confident, alluring woman with a mysterious smile. You look like you belong in this world, in this house. You look like you're in control and you're not. You're a puppet, and your strings are being pulled by the madame, by the men who walk through the door, and by the relentless, grinding reality of your life. The transformation is complete. You're no longer who you were a few hours ago. You are a different person entirely, and you are ready for your debut. The clock on the mantelpiece chimes 6 times, and a bell from downstairs signals that the parlour is open for business. The nightly performance is about to begin. You feel a sick lurch in your stomach, a mix of fear and a strange detached curiosity. Who will you be tonight? What story will you tell? What lie will you sell? You smooth the front of your dress and take a deep, shallow breath. A breath that is all your corset will allow you. You put on a smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and you walk downstairs to the parlour. The mask is on, and the show must go on. The grand clock on the mantelpiece in the parlour chimes 8 times, its sonorous sound a signal that the nightly performance has officially begun. The gas lamps are lit, casting a warm, buttery glow over the dark furniture and the velvet drapes. The air is thick with the scent of lilies and the quiet hum of conversation. You stand with the other girls, arranged in a carefully choreographed tableau of availability. Some sit gracefully on the settees, their hands folded neatly in their laps. Others stand by the fireplace, one hand on their hip in a posture of casual confidence. You have been instructed to simply stand, to observe, and to wait for a signal. The first rule of the night is to never appear desperate. This is the process of greeting and entertaining clients in the parlour. It's a stage, and every movement is part of the play. When a client is shown in by the housemaid, he is first greeted by the madam, who makes a point of introducing the girls one by one. She uses only your first name and perhaps a brief flattering adjective. "This is Eliza, our most charming singer," or "This is Sally, our quiet beauty." You realise that you have no last name here. You're a disembodied first name, a singular identity stripped of its history. The clients who enter the parlour are a varied lot. Some are young, nervous men, their faces flushed with a mixture of excitement and shame. They can barely make eye contact and stammer out a request for a drink. Others are older, more confident men, their faces etched with the lines of a life lived in the public eye. They move with an air of entitlement, their eyes sweeping over the girls as if they are selecting from a menu. One mainstream historical fact is that brothels in Victorian London were a key part of the social fabric for many men, a place where they could act outside of the strict moral codes of their society without fear of public repercussions, as long as they were discreet. Your first client is a middle-aged man with a neat moustache and a pinstripe suit. The madam gestures you forward with a subtle nod of her head. You approach him, your smile a fixed mask, and offer him a drink from a silver tray held by a scullery boy. You've been told to make a small amount of conversation, Nothing too personal, just a light, flirtatious banter. You ask him if he has had a good day. He smiles at you, his eyes lingering on your décolletage, and he says yes, a very good day indeed. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some clients would come to the parlour not for the physical act, but simply for the companionship, to sit and talk with a woman who wasn't their wife and who would not judge them. They would pay the same fee, simply for the illusion of a quiet conversation. It was a peculiar kind of loneliness, wasn't it? The conversations are an intricate dance. You're expected to be an excellent listener, to feign interest in his work, his hobbies, his life. You're a mirror, reflecting back to him the image of a desirable, intelligent woman who is utterly fascinated by him. You learn to ask open-ended questions that require him to talk about himself. "Oh, that sounds so fascinating, sir. Tell me more about your business." You must never, under any circumstances, speak of your own life. The mask must remain firmly in place. You hear other conversations happening around you. Eliza, with her practised elegance, is singing a mournful ballad at the piano for a trio of older gentlemen who look on, misty-eyed. Sally is telling a bawdy joke to a group of young men, her laughter echoing a little too loudly in the quiet room. Each of you plays a part, and you are all a little different. The madam has cast you all in roles that play to your perceived strengths. After a short while, the man with the moustache finishes his drink and whispers something to the madam. She gives him a discreet nod and then signals to you. He stands and offers you his arm, a gesture that is both courtly and deeply transactional. "Shall we, my dear?" he says, his voice a low rumble. You place your hand on his arm, and you feel the warmth of his skin through the fabric of his suit. It is a strangely intimate feeling, a moment of real human connection in a place built on illusions. You are led up the stairs, the same stairs you walked up on your first day, but this time you are not alone. The journey from the parlour to the bedroom is a short one, but it feels like a lifetime. Every step is a countdown. You wonder what he expects, what he will ask of you. You remember the madam's instructions. You are here to please the gentleman, within reason of course. Use your judgment. The phrase "within reason" is a vague and frightening one, a kind of permission to do almost anything while simultaneously making you responsible for the outcome. Once inside the room, the door is closed and locked behind you. The sound of the key turning in the lock, a final, definitive click. The fantasy of the parlour fades away, replaced by the grim reality of the bedroom. The man removes his jacket and hangs it carefully on the back of the door. He takes off his hat and places it on the washstand. He's no longer a stranger from the street. He is your client, and you are his. This is the reality of your life. The grand performance of the parlour is a prelude to a much more intimate and much less glamorous act. You are here to perform a service, and he is here to receive it. There's no more conversation about his day, no more talk of business or hobbies. It is all stripped away, leaving only the bare bones of the transaction. You're an object of desire, a repository for his fantasies, and he is a man who has paid for your time. Historians still argue whether these transactional relationships could ever evolve into something more for the women involved. You're not sure, but it feels unlikely. There is a gulf between you and him that can't be bridged by money or a brief shared intimacy. The gap is too wide, the power imbalance too great. You are no longer a person, you are a service, a product. The mask you put on this morning feels heavier now, a stifling thing that is both a shield and a prison. The nightly performance has begun in earnest, and it will not end until the gas lamps are turned off and the morning light begins to creep through the windows. You thought you had a handle on the types of men who would frequent a place like this, but you quickly learn that the reality is far more complex than a simple dichotomy of young and old, rich and poor. Over the coming weeks you encounter a whole spectrum of men, from the seemingly normal to the truly bizarre. This is the truth of clients of all sorts, a parade of human desires and insecurities that will leave you with a weary, cynical wisdom far beyond your years. There are the regulars, the men who come on the same night every week, often at the same time, requesting the same girl. They don't just pay for the physical act, they pay for familiarity. They're often quiet, reserved men who might spend more time talking about their day-to-day lives than anything else. They tell you about their work at the bank or their long-suffering wife or their children. They treat you like a confessional, a silent priestess who listens without judgment. You are their escape from a life of routine and unspoken dissatisfaction. One mainstream historical fact is that many clients of brothels were married men seeking an outlet from the strictures of Victorian marital life. where public displays of affection and sexual expression were often heavily suppressed. Then there are the young gentlemen, often university students or young professionals out on a spree. They are loud, boisterous, and full of a nervous energy that they mask with bravado. They drink too much, tell crude jokes, and treat the whole affair like a game, a thrilling transgression against the rules of their society. They often bring their friends along, a strange and competitive kind of camaraderie where they compare their experiences afterward. They are a bit pathetic in their attempts to be worldly and experienced, but they can also be the most demanding and disrespectful. You also encounter the men with peculiar tastes. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some clients would come with very specific and often innocuous requests. One man, you hear from Sally, would simply pay a girl to read poetry to him for an hour. Another, you learn from Eliza, would pay to have a girl pretend she was his sister and scold him for his late nights. It's a testament to the fact that for many men, it wasn't just about the physical act, but about fulfilling some deep-seated emotional or psychological need that they couldn't articulate in their normal lives. You're not just a body, you're a living fantasy, a blank slate onto which they project their secret desires, and then there are the ones who are simply cruel. They are the men who delight in your discomfort, who push the boundaries of what is acceptable, who use their money as a weapon to degrade you. They are the ones who make you dread the sound of the front doorbell. They come in all shapes and sizes, from the seemingly respectable man with a gold watch and a kind face to the rougher, less polished men. Their cruelty is a disease that can infect anyone, regardless of their social standing. You have to learn to deal with them all. The madame's instructions are always the same. Within reason, my dear. Use your judgment. But what does that mean? What is a reasonable request? And what is not? It's a thin, shifting line that you must navigate with no map and no guide. If you refuse a client's request, you risk his anger, which can lead to a reduced fee or even a complaint to the madam, which will result in your punishment. But if you comply, you risk your own safety, your dignity, and your mental well-being. Historians still argue whether the madam's phrase, "use your judgment," was a genuine attempt to give the women agency, or a calculated way to shift all responsibility onto them. You get the distinct impression it was the latter. One night you are with a client, a quiet older man who seems to genuinely want to talk. He's a widower, a retired professor, and he simply wants to talk about literature. You feign interest in his thoughts on Byron and Shelley, and for a fleeting moment you forget where you are. You almost forget who you are. He pays you, and leaves with a wistful smile, and for the first time you feel a flicker of something other than disgust. It's a strange, bittersweet feeling, a reminder of the kind of life you could have had, the kind of person you could have been. But then, the next night, you get a man who wants you to act like a child. He brings a doll and wants you to play with him. You feel a cold knot of dread form in your stomach. This is not the kind of thing you signed up for, but you remember the madam's cold eyes, and you remember the possibility of punishment. You put on a fake childish smile and you play the part. It is the most degrading thing you have ever had to do, and you feel a part of yourself die that night. The constant change in clients is a form of emotional whiplash. One minute you're a confidant, the next a plaything. One minute you're a lady, the next a piece of meat. You learn to put on a different mask for each man, a different accent, a different history. You become a chameleon of identity, a blank slate for every male fantasy that walks through the door. You also learn to read men. You learn to spot the signs of a good client, the ones who are respectful, the ones who are here for companionship, the ones who will simply pay and leave. And you learn to spot the bad ones, the ones whose eyes hold a glint of cruelty, the ones who talk too loudly or too quietly, the ones who seem to want to break you. It's a skill born of necessity, a way to protect yourself in a world where you have no one else to rely on. This parade of men is a mirror held up to the society you left behind. It shows you the hypocrisy, the loneliness, and the hidden desires that fester beneath the polite, proper veneer of Victorian England. You are a repository for all of it, a vessel that is filled with their secrets, and then emptied out again. You are a witness to the dark side of the human soul, and it is a heavy burden to bear. The cost of this work isn't just physical, it's emotional and it's spiritual, and every night you pay that price. You quickly learn that a man's social standing outside the brothel means nothing once he steps through the parlour doors. A rich gentleman can be as common and vulgar as a poor one, and a seemingly rough-hewn man can be surprisingly gentle. The one thing that holds true for every client, however, is the existence of a strict, unwritten code of etiquette. This is the thin line of acceptable behaviour, and you are its primary enforcer, a silent arbiter of a decorum that exists solely to preserve the fantasy and to avoid confrontation. The madam has made it clear that your survival depends on your ability to read and manage your client's moods. You're given a list of rules that seem to change with every man who enters the room. You must never rush a client. You must never complain. You must always maintain an air of polite fascination, no matter how tedious the conversation or how demeaning the request. You must be a blank canvas for his desires. If a man wants to talk for an hour, you talk. If he wants to be silent, you are silent. If he wants to be read to, you read. Your role is to adapt, to bend to his will without breaking entirely. The rules are full of subtle, unspoken exceptions. A mainstream historical fact is that while brothels were often seen as havens for vice and moral decay, many, especially the higher-end ones, maintained a strict, almost puritanical code of conduct to keep the peace and to attract a more respectable clientele. Violence, drunkenness, and profanity were often grounds for being thrown out. This was a business after all, and bad behaviour was bad for business. But you learn that these rules are often bent or broken when the client is wealthy or well-connected. A rich man's temper is often tolerated in a way that a poor man's is not. The rules you find are just as class-dependent as the rest of Victorian society. There's an unspoken signal system between the girls. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that a cough, the straightening of a ribbon, or a hand placed on the hip could all be signals to a sister worker that a client was difficult or dangerous. You watch the other girls, learning their silent language, a web of warnings and reassurances that passes between you all without a single word. If you see Eliza straighten her ribbon, you know her client is being difficult. If Sally coughs twice, it's a warning to stay away from the man she's with. It's a way to look out for each other in a world where everyone is a potential threat. Historians still argue whether this silent camaraderie was a genuine act of solidarity or a self-serving mechanism for individual survival. You get the distinct feeling it's a bit of both. You help your fellow girls out of a shared sense of fear, not a shared sense of community. The moment you feel a client is crossing the line, you're expected to handle it with a subtle grace that belies the terror you feel. You might say, "Oh sir, I'm afraid that's against the rules of the house," with a charming smile. If that fails, you might feign a headache or a sudden illness. As a last resort, you can call for the madam or the house bouncer, but this is a dangerous option. If the madam has to intervene, it's a sign of your failure to manage the situation, and you will be punished for it, either with a reduced fee or a verbal dressing down. You're expected to be an expert at de-escalation, a diplomat in a world of raw human desire. One night, you're with a man who wants to do something you find deeply unsettling. He's not violent, not crude, but his request makes your skin crawl. You try to use one of the phrases the madam taught you. "I'm afraid I'm not feeling well, sir," you say, your voice trembling slightly. He looks at you, and a cold, dangerous glint appears in his eye. "Nonsense," he says. "You'll do as I say. I've paid good money." Your heart pounds in your chest. You're trapped. You can't call for help because he hasn't done anything to justify it in the madam's eyes. You have to find a way out yourself. You think quickly, your mind racing. You start to talk, a torrent of desperate chatter about the weather, about a new play, about anything you can think of. You talk, and he looks at you, his face a mask of disappointment. He eventually gives up, gets dressed, and leaves without another word. You stand there for a long time, your body trembling, a silent victory in a war that never ends. The experience is a constant reminder of your vulnerability. You're alone in a room with a man who has paid for your time, and you're expected to handle any situation that arises. There's no training, no safety net, just your wits and your fear. The madam is not your protector. She is a manager, and you are a commodity she has to manage. You are a human resource, and a faulty resource is a liability. The rules of acceptable behaviour are a cruel joke. They are not about protecting you. They are about protecting the business. They are about maintaining the illusion of a controlled environment, a place where gentlemen can indulge their fantasies without fear of social scandal or physical harm. You are a part of that illusion. Your body and your mind are both tools in this elaborate deception. The thin line you walk is not a line between right and wrong. It's a line between a good night's pay and a bad night's beating. and you must learn to walk it perfectly every single night, with a smile on your face and a terror in your heart. You thought you had a handle on the types of men who would frequent a place like this, but you quickly learn that the reality is far more complex than a simple dichotomy of young and old, rich and poor. Over the coming weeks, you encounter a whole spectrum of men, from the seemingly normal to the truly bizarre. This is the truth of clients of all sorts, a parade of human desires and insecurities that will leave you with a weary, cynical wisdom far beyond your years. There are the regulars, the men who come on the same night every week, often at the same time, requesting the same girl. They don't just pay for the physical act, they pay for familiarity. They're often quiet, reserved men who might spend more time talking about their day-to-day lives than anything else. They tell you about their work at the bank or their long-suffering wife or their children. They treat you like a confessional, a silent priestess who listens without judgment. You are their escape from a life of routine and unspoken dissatisfaction. One mainstream historical fact is that many clients of brothels were married men seeking an outlet from the strictures of Victorian marital life, where public displays of affection and sexual expression were often heavily suppressed. Then there are the young gentlemen, often university students or young professionals out on a spree. They are loud, boisterous, and full of a nervous energy that they mask with bravado. They drink too much, tell crude jokes, and treat the whole affair like a game, a thrilling transgression against the rules of their society. They often bring their friends along, a strange and competitive kind of camaraderie, where they compare their experiences afterward. They are a bit pathetic in their attempts to be worldly and experienced, but they can also be the most demanding and disrespectful. You also encounter the men with peculiar tastes. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some clients would come with very specific and often innocuous requests. One man, you hear from Sally, would simply pay a girl to read poetry to him for an hour. Another, you learn from Eliza, would pay to have a girl pretend she was his sister and scold him for his late nights. It's a testament to the fact that for many men, it wasn't just about the physical act, but about fulfilling some deep-seated emotional or psychological need that they couldn't articulate in their normal lives. You're not just a body, you're a living fantasy, a blank slate onto which they project their secret desires. And then there are the ones who are simply cruel. They are the men who delight in your discomfort, who push the boundaries of what is acceptable, who use their money as a weapon to degrade you. They are the ones who make you dread the sound of the front doorbell. They come in all shapes and sizes, from the seemingly respectable man with a gold watch and a kind face to the rougher, less polished men. Their cruelty is a disease that can infect anyone, regardless of their social standing. You have to learn to deal with them all. The Madame's instructions are always the same. Within reason, my dear. Use your judgment. But what does that mean? What is a reasonable request, and what is not? It's a thin, shifting line that you must navigate with no map and no guide. If you refuse a client's request, you risk his anger, which can lead to a reduced fee or even a complaint to the madam, which will result in your punishment. But if you comply, you risk your own safety, your dignity, and your mental well-being. Historians still argue whether the madam's phrase, "use your judgment," was a genuine attempt to give the women agency, or a calculated way to shift all responsibility onto them. You get the distinct impression it was the latter. One night you are with a client, a quiet older man who seems to genuinely want to talk. He's a widower, a retired professor, and he simply wants to talk about literature. You feign interest in his thoughts on Byron and Shelley, and for a fleeting moment you forget where you are. You almost forget who you are. He pays you and leaves with a wistful smile, and for the first time you feel a flicker of something other than disgust. It's a strange, bittersweet feeling, a reminder of the kind of life you could have had, the kind of person you could have been. But then, the next night you get a man who wants you to act like a child. He brings a doll and wants you to play with him. You feel a cold knot of dread form in your stomach. This is not the kind of thing you signed up for, but you remember the madam's cold eyes, and you remember the possibility of punishment. You put on a fake childish smile, and you play the part. It is the most degrading thing you have ever had to do, and you feel a part of yourself die that night. The constant change in clients is a form of emotional whiplash. One minute you're a confidant, the next a plaything. One minute you're a lady, the next a piece of meat. You learn to put on a different mask for each man, a different accent, a different history. You become a chameleon of identity, a blank slate for every male fantasy that walks through the door. You also learn to read men. You learn to spot the signs of a good client, the ones who are respectful, the ones who are here for companionship, the ones who will simply pay and leave. And you learn to spot the bad ones, the ones whose eyes hold a glint of cruelty, the ones who talk too loudly or too quietly, the ones who seem to want to break you. It's a skill born of necessity, a way to protect yourself in a world where you have no one else to rely on. This parade of men is a mirror held up to the society you left behind. It shows you the hypocrisy, the loneliness, and the hidden desires that fester beneath the polite proper veneer of Victorian England. You are a repository for all of it, a vessel that is filled with their secrets and then emptied out again. You are a witness to the dark side of the human soul, and it is a heavy burden to bear. The cost of this work isn't just physical, it's emotional and it's spiritual. And every night you pay that price. You've been in the house for a few months now, and you've finally come to understand the most brutal and insidious part of your new life. It's economics. This is a business, but it's a business designed to keep you a permanent employee, perpetually in debt. This is the economics of your existence, a financial reality that is laid bare for you every Sunday morning when the Madam Mrs. Vance holds her weekly accounting. You stand in a line with the other girls, and one by one you hear the cold finality of the numbers that dictate your fate. The first thing you learn is that the money you earn is not really yours. It's an advance against a debt. When you first arrived, the Madame explained that she had paid for your food, your room, your clothes, your makeup, and your initial medical checkup. This was your entry fee, a large sum that you're now expected to pay off. You were told it would take a few months, maybe a year, but you've since realised that it is an impossible sum, a phantom that hangs over your head. One mainstream historical fact is that this debt bondage was a common tactic, used by brothel madams to keep women from leaving. The initial debt, often inflated, was a powerful tool of control, ensuring a constant supply of labour and a perpetual state of subservience. On the ledger that Mrs. Vance keeps, every single expense is meticulously recorded. The cost of your meals, a small amount for the use of the room, the price of the whalebone in your corset, the cost of the carbolic acid for your bath, even the price of a single bandage for a cut finger. It's all there, a never-ending list of fees and charges that seems to grow faster than you can pay it down. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams would even charge the girls for the use of clean towels, or for the candles they used in their rooms. It was a business model of microtransactions designed to bleed you dry with 1,000 tiny cuts. You hear the other girls' numbers being called out. Eliza, who is a top earner, is told that she has made a good sum, but then the madam deducts a percentage for her room and board, a fee for her gowns, and a service fee for the madam's management. The remaining sum is a pittance compared to what she earned. Sally, who isn't as popular, is told that she's only just broken even, and that she owes even more than she did the week before. The despair on her face is palpable. You realise that you're not just selling your body, you're selling your time, your health, and your youth, and for what? A fleeting handful of coins and a slightly smaller debt that will never truly go away. Historians still argue whether the women who worked in these establishments were truly victims, or if they had some form of agency. You get the distinct impression that you have no agency here. You are a commodity, a human resource, and you are being managed for maximum profit. The madam, who once seemed like a benevolent protector, is now revealed as a cold, calculating businesswoman who sees you not as a person, but as a walking, breathing ledger entry. When your turn comes, she looks up at you with a thin, sharp smile. She calls out your name, and you stand at attention. She reads from her ledger, a list of charges and deductions that seems to stretch on forever. The cost of your dress, the cost of your makeup, the cost of the fire in the parlour. The numbers are a blur, a dizzying whirlwind of subtraction that leaves you with nothing. You've made a good start, she says, her voice as smooth as silk. But you still have a long way to go to pay off your debt. Now get back to your room and get ready for tonight. The fleeting nature of your earnings is a crushing reality. When a client pays you, the money goes directly to the madam. You never even touch it. She gives you a small allowance, a few pennies a day for a cup of tea or a small treat from the street vendors who pass by. It's enough to keep you alive, but not enough to give you a sense of freedom. It's a bitter, cruel joke. You are earning money, but you're not getting rich. You're not getting ahead. You're simply treading water, and the current is getting stronger every day. You see a girl, A new one, get into an argument with Mrs. Vance. The girl protests the charges, saying that she can't possibly owe that much money. The madam looks at her with a cold, unblinking stare. You signed the contract, she says, her voice a low growl. You agreed to my terms. If you don't like it, you can leave. But you will leave with nothing, and you will leave in debt. The girl, her face pale with fear, looks at the other girls, who stand with their heads down, their faces impassive. She knows that we can't help her, that we're all in the same sinking boat. She eventually backs down, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The economics of this existence are designed to break you, to strip you of hope, and to ensure that you are a permanent part of the madam's profitable enterprise. The freedom you thought you would gain from the money is a mirage, a cruel illusion. You're a slave to a ledger, a prisoner of a number that only gets bigger. The money you earn is not a path to freedom. It's a chain that ties you more tightly to the house. And as you walk back to your room, you feel the weight of that chain on your shoulders. You think about the debt, about the years it will take to pay it off, about the fact that you will probably never be free. The money, you realise, is not the point. The point is the control. The point is the bondage. The point is the crushing, dehumanising reality that you are worth more to them as a debt-ridden prisoner than as a free woman. It's a bitter, painful truth, and you have no choice but to accept it. The economics of your existence might be a brutal reality, but there is an even more terrifying and more immediate threat that hangs over the house, like a permanent shroud. This is the sickness that haunts the house, a silent, unseen enemy that creeps into the dark corners and waits for its next victim. In a world with no real understanding of germ theory, and with a lifestyle that puts you in constant close contact with countless strangers, disease is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. The most common ailments are the ones you would expect: chesty coughs from the damp London air, perpetual colds that turn into lingering fevers, and the constant dull ache of fatigue that seeps into your bones and never leaves. A mainstream historical fact is that in Victorian London, the average life expectancy was shockingly low, particularly in working-class districts, and common diseases like influenza and tuberculosis were rampant. For women in your profession, who were often malnourished and overworked, these ailments were more than just an inconvenience. They were a serious threat to your livelihood and your life. Then there are the diseases of the trade, the venereal diseases. They are spoken of in hushed whispers, a grim kind of folklore. You hear stories of girls who are sent away, never to be seen again, their faces and bodies ravaged by the great pox or syphilis. You hear of others who were afflicted with gonorrhea and the agony and fever that came with it. The Madam Mrs. Vance keeps a strict eye on all the girls, checking for telltale signs of infection. If you are found to be sick, she sends for a doctor, a man who is often more of a businessman than a healer. His remedies are a parade of strange and often dangerous concoctions, from mercury tablets for syphilis to bitter herbs and tinctures. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some of these doctors would even prescribe arsenic or lead-based compounds, thinking they would cleanse the body. Of course, they only made the girls sicker. The fear of sickness is a powerful motivator. You are taught to inspect your clients, to look for any suspicious sores or rashes. You're told to demand that they wash with a special strong-smelling soap before they are allowed to touch you. You're given a litany of supposed preventative measures, from douching with carbolic acid to drinking bitter teas. You know deep down that these measures are as useful as a paper umbrella in a downpour, but you do them anyway, a superstitious ritual in a world where you have no control. The reality of your job makes the fear of sickness even more potent. You cannot take a day off for a cold, and a severe illness could mean the end of your career, and possibly your life. The madam sees a sick girl not as a patient, but as a liability, a drain on her resources. You are a product, and a damaged product is worth nothing. If you're too sick to work, you're not earning, and your debt to the madam is only growing. Historians still argue whether the medical treatments available to women in this profession were more of a punishment than a cure. You get the distinct impression that they were both. The remedies are brutal, the doctors are cold and uncaring, and the treatments are often more painful than the disease itself. They're a constant reminder that you are not a human being who needs to be healed, but a resource that needs to be fixed. One of the girls, a young woman named Clara, gets a terrible cough that she can't shake. Her face is pale, her eyes are sunken, and she's constantly shivering. The madam keeps her working, telling her to put on an extra layer and to stop complaining. Clara's cough grows worse, and you can hear her hacking in her room all night. She's a constant, rattling reminder of the fragility of your health. The other girls look at her with a mix of pity and fear. They know that what's happening to her could happen to any of them. One morning Clara doesn't come down for breakfast. The madam goes to her room and you hear her shouting. The maid and the scullery boy are sent upstairs, and they carry a wrapped bundle down the stairs. You don't see Clara again. The madam simply tells the other girls that she was sent to the hospital for a serious illness, and that she won't be coming back. You know, with a cold, sickening certainty, that she didn't go to the hospital. She went somewhere else, somewhere final. The house feels smaller now, the air heavier. The fear of sickness is a constant low-level hum in the background of your life. Every cough from a client, every fever, every ache and pain is a signal of a potential catastrophe. You begin to see your body not as your own, but as a vessel of potential illness, a walking, breathing biohazard. The worst part is the loneliness of it all. You're sick, but there is no one to care for you. You have no mother to bring you a bowl of hot soup, no father to rub your back, no friend to sit with you and hold your hand. You are alone with your illness, and you must hide it from the madam, from the other girls, and from the clients. You must put on a brave face, a perfect mask of health, even as you feel your body breaking down from the inside. The sickness that haunts this house is not just a physical affliction, it is a spiritual and emotional one. It is a constant, brutal reminder of your isolation, your vulnerability, and the fact that in this world, no one is coming to save you. For all the horror and hopelessness of your life inside the house, you sometimes find yourself thinking about a future, about the possibility of escape, redemption, or ruin. This is not a place for happy endings, but the human mind is a stubborn thing, and it clings to hope even in the most barren soil. The paths out of the profession are few and far between, and most of them lead to a fate as bleak as the one you're trying to escape. The first and most coveted path is marriage. The dream of a good man, a client who falls in love with you and takes you away from this life, is a common fantasy among the girls. You see the signs of it everywhere. The girls who flirt a little harder with the unmarried clients, the ones who try to appear more refined and educated, who tell little lies about their past to make themselves seem more worthy. A mainstream historical fact is that this rescue fantasy was a genuine phenomenon for some women. A small percentage of them did indeed marry their clients, though it was often into a life of social obscurity and with the constant risk of their past being discovered. It was a trade of one kind of servitude for another, a life in which you were forever grateful to your saviour. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams, particularly the more shrewd ones, would actively encourage this. They would vet potential clients, looking for lonely, well-to-do men who seemed ripe for a bit of romantic manipulation. For the madam, it was a profitable venture. She would sell the girl's trousseau and would sometimes even receive a dowry from the client, a final payment for the time and money she had invested. It was the ultimate cynical business transaction, and you couldn't help but be a little impressed by the audacity of it all. Historians still argue whether this was a true act of benevolence on the part of the madam or simply another form of exploitation. You get the distinct impression it was the latter, with a thin, brittle veneer of kindness. The second path is to save enough money to start a new life. This, you quickly realise, is a cruel joke. The economics of your existence, remember, are designed to keep you in debt. The debt to the madam, the cost of your room and board, the endless parade of deductions, it all adds up to an impossible sum. You might try to hoard a few pennies here and there, a coin slipped into a secret pocket, but the madam has eyes everywhere, and any attempt to hide money is met with a swift and brutal punishment. You see girls get caught, and their tiny stashes of coins are confiscated, their meagre hopes dashed on the rocks of reality. The money, you realise, is not the point. The point is the control. The third path is to simply run away. This is the most dangerous option of all. The London streets, which once seemed like a haven, are now a far more dangerous place for a woman with no money, no home, and no connections. The police, who are often in league with the madams, would be the first to look for you. The streets are full of predators, both men and women who would see you as an easy target. Without the protection of the house, however thin that protection may be, you are completely alone and vulnerable. You would either fall into an even lower form of the trade, in a squalid kip house, or you would end up in a workhouse, a place of starvation and back-breaking labour that is often described as a living hell. Sally tells you a story about a girl who tried to escape. She made it a few miles before she was caught by two men who brought her back. She was beaten. Her beautiful clothes were torn to shreds, and she was forced to work for a month with no pay. It was a public lesson, a grim warning to all the other girls. You don't try to run after that. You know it's a death sentence. The final path, the one you see the most often, is ruin. It is the slow, inevitable slide from a high-end brothel to a lower-end one, from the streets to the workhouse, and finally to the grave. It's the path of a girl who is too sick, too old, or too worn down to continue working. Her beauty fades, her health fails, and she's eventually cast out onto the street where she must fend for herself. You see her on the street corners, a hollow-eyed ghost of her former self, a silent warning of what lies ahead for all of you. You watch as an older woman, a woman who had once been a prima donna, is told by the madam that her services are no longer required. The woman, her face a mask of weary acceptance, simply gathers her meagre belongings and leaves. You see her a few weeks later on the street, her beautiful clothes replaced by rags, her face caked with dirt. She looks at you, and her eyes hold a message of silent despair. She's the future you're all trying to avoid, but a future that is waiting for all of you at the end of this long dark road. The bitter irony is that the very thing that is supposed to save you, the money, the marriage, the escape, is also the thing that is keeping you here. You can't leave because you are in debt. You can't find a good man because of your profession. You can't save money because of the madam. You're a prisoner in a gilded cage, and the bars are made of money and hope. The longer you stay, the more likely you are to fall into ruin. It's a paradox of despair, a beautiful trap with no exit. The house, for all its gilded trappings, is a world unto itself, a separate kingdom with its own rules and its own economy. But you can't exist in a vacuum, and every so often you get a glimpse of the outside world, a world that is so close and yet so impossibly far away. This interaction with the world beyond the brothel is a strange and often jarring experience, a reminder of the two separate realities you inhabit. The first interaction is often with the street vendors. They stand outside the iron gate, their carts filled with fresh flowers, roasted chestnuts, or hot pies. They are the only people who see you without a mask. They see you as a girl, not as a product. They know what goes on behind the lace curtains, but they don't judge you for it. They are a kind of a silent Greek chorus to your life, a constant presence that reminds you that life, in all its messy, chaotic glory, is happening right outside your door. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams would allow their girls to buy small treats from these vendors, a little luxury to keep them from growing too despondent. It was a cynical act of kindness, a way to keep you compliant without giving you any real freedom. Then there are the police, the constables on the beat who patrol the streets. They are a constant low-level threat. They might turn a blind eye to the brothel, either because they are being paid off or because they simply have bigger fish to fry, but they can also be a source of terror, a sudden knock on the door, a raid that can lead to an arrest and a public humiliation. A mainstream historical fact is that prostitution in Victorian London was technically illegal, though the laws were often selectively enforced. The police had a great deal of discretion, and their relationship with a brothel was often a reflection of their personal corruption or their department's policy. The Madam Mrs. Vance has a system for dealing with them, a series of codes and signals that can be sent to the front door, a subtle exchange that ensures they keep walking. You are instructed to be as invisible as possible when a constable is present, to become a shadow in the corner of the room. Another interaction is with the tradesmen who come to the house, the coal man, the grocer, the delivery boys. They're a parade of humanity that passes through the front door, a brief glimpse of the outside world. They treat you with a kind of awkward deference, a mix of pity and fascination. They are not clients, but they know what you are, and their polite nods and averted eyes are a silent reminder of your place in society. You are a pariah, a woman who is both desirable and untouchable. Historians still argue whether the anonymity of the city was a blessing or a curse for women in your profession. You get the distinct impression that it was both. On one hand, you are a ghost, a person with no history, no family and no past. On the other hand, you were completely alone, with no one to turn to, no one to confide in, and no one to love. The city was a place where you could be anyone, but also a place where you were no one. The anonymity was a kind of freedom, but it was a freedom born of your absolute isolation. The most difficult interaction is with the moral reformers who sometimes try to enter the house. They are often women from the upper classes who see you as a lost soul, a sinner who needs to be saved. They preach at you, telling you that you can find redemption in God, that you can leave this life behind. Their words are a cruel joke. They offer you a path that doesn't exist, a redemption that is only possible for those who have the means to escape. They don't understand the debt, the fear, the lack of options. They see your profession as a moral failing, not a brutal economic reality. You're polite to them, of course. You listen to their words, you nod your head, and you take their pamphlets. But when they leave, you throw the pamphlets into the fire, a small act of defiance. Their kindness is a lie, a condescending gesture from a woman who has no idea what it is like to be you. One afternoon, you and Sally get a pass to go to the park. It's a rare and precious gift from the madam, a way to keep you from growing too pale and listless. You put on a simple bonnet and a plain dress, and you walk out into the London sunshine. The noise of the city is a symphony of life. The carriages clatter on the cobblestones, the street urchins shout, and the church bells chime. You feel a sense of overwhelming, dizzying freedom. You watch the mothers pushing their prams, the couples walking hand in hand, the children chasing after a ball. They are all living a life that you once thought was yours, a life of simple, ordinary happiness. And for a moment you forget who you are. You forget the debt, the fear, the sickness. You're just a girl in a park, a part of the human race. But then a man, a client you had entertained a few weeks ago, walks by. He looks at you, and his eyes hold a flash of recognition. He gives you a small, knowing smile, and he keeps walking. The moment shatters. The mask is back on, the cage is back around you, and the two realities you inhabit slam back into each other. You are not a girl in a park. You are a brothel worker in a plain dress, and your life is a lie. You go back to the house, your head bowed, the weight of the city pressing down on you. The street vendors, the police, the moral reformers, they are not a part of your world. They are just a mirror held up to your face, a constant, cruel reminder of what you are and what you will never be. The outside world is not a place of escape. It is a place of perpetual exposure, a public stage where your private hell is on full display. In a world designed to isolate you, you find yourself seeking connection wherever you can, and that often means with the other women in the house. This is the truth of the silent sisters of the trade, a bond and a rivalry that is a source of both comfort and betrayal. You're all in the same sinking boat, but you're also all fighting for the same limited number of lifeboats. There are no formal introductions or forced friendships. The relationships here are organic, born of proximity, and a shared, unspoken understanding of your circumstances. You and Sally, your roommate, have a quiet, enduring bond. She's your confidant, the one person you can speak to without a mask, the one who understands the silent language of the house without you having to explain it. You share secrets in the dark, hushed whispers about a particularly cruel client or a particularly kind one. You share a small, private humour about the madam's ridiculous rules or the absurdity of your own lives. One mainstream historical fact is that these bonds between women in brothels were often the only source of emotional support they had. They were a kind of surrogate family, a sisterhood forged in the fire of shared misery. But for every bond there is a rivalry. You are all competing for the same clients, the same good graces of the madam, the same small chance at a better life. Eliza, the prima donna, is a constant source of both admiration and resentment. She is beautiful, skilled, and utterly detached. She earns the most money, and she's a constant reminder of what you could be if you simply gave up a little more of your soul. She's not a friend, but she's a model, a grim example of success in this brutal profession. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that in some brothels, madams would deliberately foster this rivalry, pitting the girls against each other to keep them from forming alliances that might threaten her control. She would praise one girl's beauty in front of another, or she would give a prime client to a girl who had a lower standing, all in a silent game of manipulation. Historians still argue whether this was a true act of psychological warfare, or simply a pragmatic business decision to keep the girls motivated. You get the distinct feeling it was the former, a cold and calculated act of cruelty designed to keep you all from seeing each other as anything but a threat. The bond you share with the other girls is a fragile thing, a thin thread of humanity in a world of depravity. You see a girl get a beautiful dress, and you feel a flash of jealousy, but then you see the haunted look in her eyes, and the jealousy is replaced with pity. You see a girl come down with a terrible fever, and you feel a sense of relief that it is not you, but then you remember Clara, and the relief is replaced with a cold, sickening fear. The bond is there, but it is constantly tested by the fear of being left behind. You see a moment of true solidarity one night. A new girl, no older than 15, comes into the parlour and is immediately terrified. She can't stop shaking, and her eyes are wide with a kind of primal fear. A rough-looking client comes in and asks for her. The madame is about to send her up, but then Sally, with a bravery that surprises you, steps forward. "Oh, sir," she says, her voice as sweet as honey. "I'm afraid that one is feeling quite ill tonight, but I would be happy to entertain you instead." The client looks at her, then back at the new girl, and with a shrug, agrees. He goes upstairs with Sally, and the new girl is left in the parlour, a look of profound relief on her face. It was a small, silent act of defiance, a moment of kindness in a world that is so starved for it. The betrayal can be just as silent and just as brutal. A girl might tell the madam that you were hiding a few coins, or that you were flirting too much with a client who was supposed to be hers. The madam would then call you into her office, a cold, knowing look on her face, and you would know that you had been betrayed. The betrayal is not just about the money or the punishment, it is about the destruction of the trust you had so painstakingly built. It is a reminder that in this world, everyone is out for themselves, and that even the people you thought you could rely on are a threat. The bond and the rivalry are two sides of the same coin. The bond is a defence against the world outside, and the rivalry is a reflection of the world within. You need the other girls to survive, but you also have to be constantly on your guard against them. You are a family, but you're a family of scorpions in a bottle, and the bottle is getting smaller every day. The love and the hate, the comfort and the betrayal are all a part of the same brutal existence. You are silent sisters in a world that wants to break you, and you're all trying to survive no matter the cost. The outside world, with its moral reformers and its judgmental glances, is not the only place where you experience hypocrisy. The greatest source of it lies right within the walls of the house, in the very nature of your existence. This is the public face, the private hell, a paradox where vice is both condemned and eagerly sought after. The men who come to the house are the very men who would condemn you on the street, the pillars of the community, the men who sit on church boards and preach about the sanctity of marriage. The societal hypocrisy of the era is a constant bitter joke. The Victorians built their world on a foundation of strict morality, a code of conduct that demanded chastity, propriety and respectability. But underneath that shiny veneer, a thriving underworld of vice flourished, and it was patronised by the very people who created the moral code. You see it every night in the faces of the clients, the respectable businessman who whispers vulgarities in your ear, the polite churchgoer who demands a transgression, the seemingly devout family man who leaves his morality at the door and picks it up again on his way out. One mainstream historical fact is that this double standard was a well-known, though rarely spoken of, aspect of Victorian life. It was a silent agreement between the two halves of society, a public life of piety and a private life of indulgence. You are a crucial part of this public hypocrisy. You are a repository for a man's secret desires, a convenient outlet for his forbidden fantasies. By patronising you, he can compartmentalise his life. He can be a good husband and a pillar of the community by day and a libertine by night. He can indulge his urges without having to confront the reality of who he is. You, the woman who makes this possible, are then condemned for it, as if you alone are responsible for his moral failings. The Madam, Mrs. Vance, is a master of this game. She carefully cultivates an atmosphere of discretion and refinement, an air of a private club rather than a public brothel. She insists on the elegant gowns, the formal manners, the refined conversations in the parlour. This is not for your benefit. It is to make the clients feel better about themselves. It is to help them maintain the fiction that they are not visiting a brothel, but are simply being entertained by a fallen woman in a private residence. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some high-end madams would even have their girls learn to play the piano or speak a foreign language, all to add to the illusion of a more sophisticated, less transactional experience. It was a kind of high-class theatre, with you as the lead actress in a very long, very depressing play. You see the truth of this hypocrisy in the way the men act. They are polite and charming in the parlour, but as soon as they are alone with you, the mask comes off. The words and actions they would never dare to speak or perform in public are suddenly unleashed. They seem to take a kind of grim pleasure in this duality, in the fact that they can be two different people at once. You're the only person who sees both sides of them, and this knowledge is both a burden and a form of power. Historians still argue whether the moral reformers of the era, many of whom were women, were truly benevolent, or if their actions were rooted in a kind of class-based judgment. You get the distinct impression that they were both. They genuinely believed they were helping you, but they saw you as a sinner, a social outcast, a woman who had failed to live up to the strict moral code that they had the privilege to live by. They couldn't understand that for you, it wasn't a moral failing. It was a matter of survival. Their judgment, cloaked in the language of piety, was a cruel, condescending thing that only served to reinforce your status as an outsider. The public face of this hypocrisy is the society that condemns you. The private hell is the reality of your daily life. You are a part of a system that is built on lies and deception. The men lie to themselves about their morality. The madam lies to the world about her business, and you lie to everyone about who you are. The lies are what keep the whole thing running. You lie to the clients about your past, your feelings, your desires. You lie to the madam about your health, your emotions, your money. And you lie to yourself about the possibility of escape. The hypocrisy is the air you breathe. It is a suffocating, corrupting thing that eats away at your soul. You learn to compartmentalize, to put on a different mask for every situation. You learn to smile when you're terrified, to laugh when you want to cry, to feign pleasure when you feel nothing but disgust. The private hell is the constant, low-level hum of your own self-betrayal, the slow, insidious process of losing who you are. You are a woman who is condemned for a life you were forced to live, a life that was enabled and paid for by the very people who condemned you. It is a brutal, ironic, and unending cycle of shame and hypocrisy, and you are its central figure. The public face you present is a mask of passive compliance, but beneath it, you live with an ever-present low-level thrum of fear. This is the ever-present threat of violence, a constant risk of physical and emotional abuse that is a part of your daily life. It doesn't come in the form of a villain with a black moustache and a menacing laugh. It comes in the form of a respectable-looking man who has paid for the right to do what he wants with your body, and who sees your compliance not as kindness, but as a form of servitude. The violence is not always physical. It can be a cruel, cutting word, a degrading demand, or a look that strips you of your humanity. It is the emotional and psychological violence that slowly eats away at your soul. You are a repository for a man's anger, his frustrations and his darkest urges. He can be rude and demanding, and you are expected to take it with a smile. If a man has had a bad day at work, he can take it out on you, and there is nothing you can do about it. The madam sees this as a part of the service, a necessary evil that comes with the territory. One mainstream historical fact is that this kind of emotional and verbal abuse was a common and often ignored aspect of the profession. It was a form of violence that left no physical marks, but that was just as damaging as a punch or a kick. But the physical violence is a very real possibility as well. You learn to read the signs, the sudden clenching of a fist, the dangerous glint in a man's eye, the way his voice drops to a low, menacing growl. You are taught to deflect, to placate, to do whatever you can to de-escalate the situation, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes a man is simply looking for a fight, and you are the unfortunate target. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams would employ a bouncer, or a strong male servant who would keep a watchful eye on the house, and who could be called upon to remove a violent client. But this was a rare luxury, and it was often a last resort. The madame, remember, is in the business of making money, and a noisy, violent scene is bad for business. If a client is being difficult, she would often prefer that you handle it yourself, to avoid any unpleasantness that might scare away other clients. Historians still argue whether the high-end brothels offered a safer environment for women than the low-end ones. You get the distinct impression that the violence in this place is simply more subtle. It is the kind of violence that is inflicted with a whisper rather than a shout, with a cold, calculating cruelty rather than a drunken rage. It is the violence of a man who knows he can get away with it, a man who has paid for the right to dehumanize you. You see a girl, a new one, get into a fight with a client. He's drunk and he demands something from her that she's not willing to give. He slaps her across the face, and the sound echoes through the quiet house. You freeze. your heart pounding in your chest. The madame rushes in, her face a mask of fury, but her fury is not directed at the client. It is directed at the girl. "You're scaring away my business," she shouts, her voice a low snarl. She has the bouncer, a large brutish man, remove the client from the premises, but not before the man pays his full fee. The girl, her face red and swollen, is sent to her room without a meal, a silent punishment for her failure to maintain the peace. The experience is a constant reminder that you are not protected. You are simply a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved. If a client hurts you, it is your fault for failing to de-escalate the situation. If a client takes his anger out on you, it is your fault for not placating him. The blame is always on you, never on the man who is paying you for your time. The madam's logic is a cold, brutal thing. You're paid to take the abuse, and if you can't, then you're not worth your wage. The constant threat of violence is a kind of psychological warfare. You're always on edge, always looking for the signs of a man's displeasure, always trying to find a way to get through the night without a bruise or a cut. You learn to walk on eggshells, to choose your words carefully, and to never, ever challenge a man's authority. Your body, which is supposed to be a tool for pleasure, is in fact a battlefield, a site of constant conflict. The physical and emotional violence of the house is not an anomaly. It is a feature. It is a part of the contract, a part of the service. You are paid to be a punching bag, a silent confessional, a repository for a man's darkest desires. The fear of violence is a constant companion, a silent shadow that follows you wherever you go. You are never truly safe, even within the walls of the house. The violence, you realize, is not just something that happens to you. It is a part of who you are now. It is in the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you flinch when a man raises his hand. You are a woman who has been broken, and the scars are not just on your body, they're on your soul. The constant threat of violence is a bruise on your soul, but the slow, insidious toll of the work takes an even greater toll. This is the weight of time, the gradual erosion of your youth, your health, and your spirit. You are a product with a short shelf life, and you feel yourself nearing your expiration date with every passing day. The first thing to go is your health. The constant cycle of late nights and early mornings leaves you perpetually exhausted. You subsist on meagre, unhealthy meals, and you're constantly exposed to germs and illnesses from the parade of clients. Your body, once a source of strength, becomes a source of pain. Your feet are a permanent ache from the tight shoes you wear. Your back hurts from the corset. Your lungs feel heavy and full of a damp chill that never leaves. A mainstream historical fact is that the life expectancy for a woman in your profession was significantly lower than that of her contemporaries, with many dying from diseases like tuberculosis, syphilis, or simply from exhaustion. You are a living example of this statistic, a slow-motion disaster in a beautiful dress. Then there is the psychological toll, the constant performance, the putting on and taking off of masks, the feigned pleasure and the forced smiles. It all eats away at your mind. You start to lose a sense of who you are. The girl you were before you came to this house is a distant memory, a ghost in the back of your mind. You begin to talk to yourself, to have silent conversations with the ghost of your past self. You wonder if you will ever be able to be yourself again, to have a thought or a feeling that is not dictated by the needs of a client. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some madams would even have a specific day of rest, where the girls were not allowed to talk or to make eye contact with each other, a kind of forced psychological reset that was designed to prevent them from forming any real bonds. It was a subtle, sadistic act of cruelty, a way to ensure that you were utterly alone in your own mind. Historians still argue whether the emotional detachment that many of these women developed was a conscious choice or a necessary side effect of their work. You get the distinct impression that it was both. You had to learn to detach yourself from your body, to see it as a separate entity that could be used and abused without it affecting you. But in doing so, you lost a part of yourself. You became a stranger in your own skin. The detachment was a shield, but it was a shield that turned against you. You see the toll of time in the other women as well. Eliza, the beautiful prima donna, is beginning to show her age. The lines around her eyes are deeper now, her smile a little more forced, her laughter a little more brittle. She is still beautiful, but it is a beauty that is on the wane. She looks at the new girls, the ones who are still full of a naive hope, with a look of weary pity. She knows what is coming for them, and she knows there is nothing she can do to stop it. Sally, your roommate, is beginning to get sick more often. Her cough is a constant presence in the room, and she's losing weight. She no longer tells jokes or laughs about the absurdity of your lives. She's quiet, and she looks at the lumpy mattress with a kind of resigned acceptance. She knows that her time is running out. She's not fighting it anymore. She's simply waiting. The weight of time is a crushing thing. It is not a sudden blow, but a slow, gradual decline. It is in the way your body feels a little more tired every morning, the way your face looks a little more worn out in the mirror, the way your soul feels a little more empty every night. You are a candle that is burning at both ends, and you can see the flame getting smaller and smaller. You look at yourself in the mirror one night. The woman looking back at you is not the girl who walked through the iron gate. The eyes are older, sadder, and filled with a knowledge that is as heavy as a lead apron. The smile is a professional mask that no longer reaches your eyes. The hair is dull, the skin is pale, and the body is tired. You are a worn-out copy of your former self, a beautiful lie that is beginning to crack. The weight of time is not just about your body, it is about your spirit. It is the slow death of your hopes, your dreams, and your faith in a better future. You no longer dream of escape or a knight in shining armour. You dream of a quiet place, a place where you can simply rest, a place where you're no longer a product, a commodity, or a source of pleasure for a stranger. You dream of a life where you can simply be, without having to pretend to be someone else. The weight of time is the realization that this dream is a luxury you can no longer afford. The weight of time is a crushing thing, and it eventually leads you to the end of the line, the final stage of this long, dark journey. Your future, once a source of faint hope, has now been reduced to a handful of grim possibilities, none of which end in a happy marriage or a new life. This is the truth of what awaits you when your youth and health have finally faded. The first and perhaps most common end is the streets. The Madame, Mrs. Vance, is a businesswoman, and a worn-out product is a drain on her resources. When you can no longer attract the high-paying clients, when your body is riddled with illness, and your face is a map of a life of hardship, she will cast you out. She will give you a small amount of money, a kind of severance pay for a life of service, and she will send you on your way. You will find yourself on the streets of London, a ghost of your former self, a silent warning to the girls who are still inside. You will have no home, no money, and no family. You will be a part of the vast anonymous sea of humanity, a woman with no name and no place to go. You will either die from starvation, cold, or disease, or you will fall into an even lower form of the trade, a life in a squalid kip house, where you will work for a few pennies a night, your body an object of disgust rather than desire. A second possibility is the workhouse. For a woman with no other options, the workhouse is a last resort, a place of forced labour and constant humiliation. You will work from sunrise to sunset, breaking rocks or picking oakum, a kind of coarse hemp. You will be given a small bowl of gruel a day, and you will sleep in a communal dormitory with other women who have also reached the end of the line. The workhouse is a living hell, a place where your dignity is stripped away, and your body is worked until it can work no more. One mainstream historical fact is that the workhouse system was designed to be a deterrent, a place so miserable that the poor would do anything to avoid it. For many women in your profession, it was the final destination, a cold, brutal end to a life of hardship. Then there is the asylum. For many of the women in this profession, the psychological toll of the work is too great. The constant fear, the emotional detachment, the loss of self, it all leads to a kind of madness. You see it in the other girls, in the way they talk to themselves, in the way their eyes stare at nothing, in the way they laugh at a joke that isn't funny. You will eventually be deemed unfit for society, a woman who is too broken to be of any use. You will be sent to a lunatic asylum, a place of filth and despair where you will be locked away and forgotten. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some of these asylums were funded by wealthy benefactors who saw it as a form of moral charity, a way to save women from a life of sin by locking them away from society. It was a kind of spiritual cleansing that came with a price tag, and that price tag was your sanity and your freedom. Historians still argue whether the high rate of mental illness among these women was a result of their work or if they were already psychologically vulnerable. You get the distinct impression that it was the former. This life is a slow, insidious form of madness, a gradual breakdown of your mind and your spirit. The work is not just a physical act, it is a psychological one, and the cost is your sanity. The final end is the most brutal and the most common, a lonely death. You will die alone, in a cold, unforgiving room, your body ravaged by disease, your mind a mess of broken memories. You will die without a name, without a family, and without a single person to mourn you. Your death will be a silent one, a footnote in the vast anonymous history of the London poor. You will be buried in an unmarked grave, your body a final anonymous part of the city. The sad truth is that there is no escape. The paths you once thought were a way out are just different roads to the same grim destination. The marriage you dreamed of, the money you tried to save, the escape you thought you could make, they were all a cruel mirage, a trick of the light in a dark and unforgiving world. You are a woman who has been bought and sold, used and discarded, and there is no coming back from that. The end of the line is not a dramatic, sudden event. It is a slow, gradual process, a final, weary surrender to a world that has already broken you. You are a survivor, but you are a survivor in a world that has no place for you. You have come to the end of your story, and the only thing left is to face the final, lonely truth of your existence. Welcome back to the room. The gas lamps are flickering out and the London fog is creeping in through the cracks in the window. The sounds of the city are a distant hum now, and the house is quiet, its secrets safely tucked away for the night. The journey is over and you are no longer a part of that world, that life. You are back here, in the quiet, in the dark. The story is a memory now, a dark dream from which you have finally woken. You're safe. You are home. The silence is not a sign of loneliness, it is a sign of peace. The cold you feel is not the cold of a Victorian room, it is the soft, gentle breeze of a fan. The lumpy mattress is gone, and the darkness is a comfort, not a threat. Just breathe in and out, slowly, deeper. Let the images fade. Let the story dissolve. The door is no longer locked, the debt is paid, and the night is yours. Sleep now, my friend. You've earned it.